All right, so today we're talking about a pretty important topic that could affect college students all over the country. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, we are here to talk about Title IX violations, and we just finished another case successfully here at a local college. And these cases are really challenging. Basically, what Title IX is, it's federal law, but when most people think about Title IX, they think about equality in college athletics for male and female sports and athletic teams. But what Title IX also covers and it is meant to prevent is discrimination based upon gender on any college campus. So what it includes in our context is sexual assaults, sexual harassment, and dating and domestic violence that occurs on college campuses or off campus amongst college students. So we represent individuals who have been charged with Title IX violations in that context. And again, we just finished another case successfully. And these are hard cases because there's a lot on the line. There's a lot of privilege, and they are different from criminal cases in a lot of ways.
Right, so these are not criminal charges. These are violations against a school.
Correct. These are not criminal cases. You don't go to court. You don't appear in front of a judge. You can. The same allegation that a college levies against you can be brought in criminal court. You can be arrested for those. But they're two separate proceedings. So what we're talking about is a Title IX hearing on a college campus in front of a hearing board made up of student conduct office members, professors, staff, people who are trained to be Title IX hearing board members, but
are
not,
any
not
of them
judges.
Any students ever or peers that are on this board? Or
There's different levels of violations and different policies. A college will have a general student conduct policy, but as far as Title IX hearings go, they are not students. In fact, some colleges actually hire outside counsel to be part of the hearing board. So an attorney would be on the board as well. But they are not judges. They don't necessarily have to be attorneys.
Okay. Well, let's back it up. So what would a violation of a Title IX look like?
Sure. It could be anything, sexual harassment. So anything that you say to offend, demean, threaten, or harass. I hate to use the word, but to harass another person based upon their gender. It can be sexual assault. It can be as minor as just non-consensual touching, or it can be non-consensual sexual intercourse, or what in the criminal world we would call a rape charge. In these contexts, we call it non-consensual sexual intercourse. It can be based upon intoxication, or it can be based upon just regular non-consensual behavior. But it also includes, which is just as important, dating and domestic violence, stalking, anything between two individuals who are in a romantic relationship.
And is this just on campus, or can there be a Title IX brought against you from something that happened outside of campus?
So the Title IX policy itself covers any behavior that's alleged to have been during any sort of educational activity or campus property in general terms. So yes, in most cases, Title IX violations occur on campus, in dorm rooms, things like that. But it also could cover off-campus activity if it's a school-sponsored event or a building that the college owns, like a fraternity house or a sorority house off campus. If there is something that happens off campus between students, let's say at an off-campus house, it may not qualify as a Title IX violation under the Title IX policy, but it still would be something the school can prosecute under their general code of conduct.
So basically, when you become a student at a college, you basically say you're going to abide by these rules.
Exactly. Yep.
Just no matter where you are.
You sign, up to attend a school, you're going to live by the code of conduct of that school. And live up to their standards. So if you get charged with a crime that happens off campus, the school can charge you under their code of conduct.
So what happens if someone is accused of one of these violations?
So the first thing that happens is a complaint gets filed, and a complaint is just a general statement filed by the alleged victim to the school that says, this happened to me. It can be, like I said, sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating, or domestic violence. And the troublesome part for the accused is that in that complaint, there need not be any details. There does not have to be supporting proof. There does not have to be anything that corroborates it. Most of the time, the complaint is just an online form where you type out what you allege happened to you. And from there, the Title IX investigation, the grievance process starts like a snowball rolling down a hill. So a victim files this complaint, and then the next thing that happens is the accused student just gets an email to their college email address that says, you have been named as the suspect in a Title IX violation. You are alleged to have done X, Y, and Z on this date or about this date. Again, they don't have to give detail, and a lot of times they don't. So it might say, during the fall semester of 2021, you engaged in non-consensual sexual behavior with this person. And after you get that email, right, you know, it's probably the worst email that you can get, the most stressful email, and you have to defend yourself from those allegations. And like I said, in that particular hypothetical right there is not much information that they give you. Could be a semester, it could be a year, and you have to be interviewed by the Title IX investigators about this general allegation when you really don't know what it's about.
Are you expelled when you get this email?
You are not expelled. You can be suspended on an interim basis while the investigation is pending. The school has to make certain findings. My experience is that is reserved for the most drastic allegations. Generally, interim suspensions apply when the college believes that the safety and health of one of their students or faculty or staff is endangered by the other individual. Most cases don't result in an interim suspension, but they can.
Okay. So then after that, a hearing comes about, or?
Yeah, so it's a long process that eventually leads to a hearing. I'd say that most colleges have artificial dates that they try to finish these by, usually between 3 and 4 months, but my experience is that they last longer for many different reasons and factors. But between the time you get that email notifying you of the allegations and the time you actually do the hearing, the school conducts an investigation. What they do is they interview both parties. They interview witnesses. They collect any evidence that you might provide to them that you think is important.
So the school is building a case against the person who is alleged to have done something.
I think that's one way to look at it. You can say the school is building their case against the person. I don't think the colleges would describe it that way because obviously they describe this as a fair process and that due process is afforded to everybody. We can talk about the differences between a criminal case and a Title IX case and about how due process, in my opinion, is limited.
Well, I was going to say, we can talk about that now because when can you hire an attorney for this and why should you?
Yes, you can, and yes, you should. Because in this context, the minute you get that email, the school expects you to contact them to schedule an interview. And
you're a student. You have no idea how to protect yourself.
You're a student. You're 18, 19, 20 years old. And I think in a lot of ways, these processes are described as no big deal. I can't tell you how many times that people have called me and said, well, I was already interviewed by the college because they told me it was no big deal.
Right.
They told me they just wanted my side of the story.
Which it is a big deal.
It is absolutely a big deal.
For both parties.
Yes, you are 100%. It is a big deal for alleged victims. Sexual assault is not okay.
Right.
And there should be punishments for those that do violate somebody's rights. 100%. We're not denying that. But it's also important to the accused because this is a person who, like you said, is 18, 19, 20 years old, and they are facing suspension, expulsion, notations on their transcript that will stay with them forever.
Could hinder a career
Correct.
moving forward.
And one thing that I noticed, like I said, going back, these are extremely important topics, but over the last couple of years, in my opinion, we have seen a rise in the number of false allegations that are filed.
How do you know they're false? So what's
Because we have
our-
represented individuals,
Yeah.
and we have conducted our own investigation, and we have uncovered, in some cases, concrete proof that the person is not telling the truth. In the context of these cases, we have heard from different people, and Title IX is in some ways being used as a verb amongst these students. If somebody gets into an argument or a disagreement, people have said, "I'm going to Title IX you," right? And I don't think that was the underlying intent in what this law was meant for. The law is a good law, and it's meant to protect people from discrimination based upon gender, based upon sex. It covers sexual assault and sexual harassment. But like I said, we have represented individuals. We have uncovered photographs, text messages, spoken to witnesses, proven that things that someone says happened did not happen, or that they were exaggerated.
Well, when someone hires us, what do we do?
Yeah, so the first thing that we do is we start our own investigation. Like I said, the college conducts their investigation. They have Title IX investigators. Sometimes they are private investigators that are hired by the college, usually if it's a smaller school. Some bigger schools have their own Title IX investigators. But we hire our own investigator to do our own investigation, to talk to witnesses, to collect evidence. In some ways, the evidence is anything at all relevant to the relationship between the two people. Most importantly and most obviously, text messages, photographs, videos, things like that. Obviously, with our society nowadays, there are different forms of communication that make this harder. Obviously, Snapchat, everyone's familiar with Snapchat. Unless you take some, affirmative action to save a message, Snapchat messages are deleted. So that makes it difficult because a lot of kids use that to communicate.
But our job is to figure out what happened as well.
Correct. And the whole point of our investigation is to get to the truth, right? To represent this individual, to protect their rights, and to get to the truth. So we conduct our investigation. We collect all of this evidence. We turn it into the college as part of their report. Going back to why you should hire an attorney is because you need this help to represent you. You may not know what your rights are. You may not know how to collect this evidence or even what to collect. I mean, on certain cases, we have gone so far as to hire an investigator to obtain Easy Pass records of individuals to prove when they got to a particular college, because it was relevant to that particular case. But we kind of go outside the box to think, because you ultimately have to give the hearing board at the college a true picture of what happened, and you have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. It's very easy for two people to go to a hearing and for one person to say, this person did this, and for the accused to say, no, I didn't. And in that case, it's whoever the hearing board believes in that context. The burden of proof in a Title IX hearing is lower. It's preponderance of the evidence, which is basically who do they believe more, even if it's just by a little.
Right.
So we like to obtain evidence, if we can, that does not lie, that only tells the truth. Pictures don't lie. Text messages, emails, photographs, they don't lie. So it's important to have a lawyer, because in the process, the school will give you an advisor to walk you through the process. In most contexts, that's a professor or a staff member who has obtained some training to become an advisor in these Title IX processes. And we represented a student probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And after he hired us, we reached out to his advisor, who was a professor at the college. And she basically said, I'm so happy that you were hired because, in all honesty, I am not equipped to handle this type of case. I am not knowledgeable enough to represent this student who's facing expulsion.
Right.
And that's kind of like the behind the scenes look at
Yeah.
how these advisors feel. It's a lot of pressure for them.
Yeah.
And
that's not their job.
Correct,
It's kind
yeah.
of just a part of it.
Right.
So they weren't trained to do
Exactly. And at the hearing, under the current Title IX rules, the advisor cross-examines the other party, the other witnesses. And professors may be great professors and they may be great at what they do, but what they've never done is cross-examine someone, right? And
Right.
cross-examination in a lot of ways is the whole case. It's the art of getting to the truth.
Yes. Which is interesting. So going into the hearing, a lot of these hearings, you as the student have to basically ask the questions yourself. You as the attorney cannot ask the questions for them.
So
you are allowed.
That's
yeah,
how it
does
used
that
to
work?
be.
Oh, okay.
That's how it used to be. In 2020, the law changed, and advisors were able to conduct the cross-examination.
Oh, okay. So before the students had to basically
correct.
do the whole thing themselves, but now
Yep.
you're able to help.
Exactly.
Okay.
So under the current laws, since 2020, the advisors do the cross-examination. So at the most recent hearing, I did the cross-examination. It is different from criminal court, right? You watch Law and Order. If you've ever had jury duty, cross-examination occurs in court directly between the attorney and the witness who's on the stand. You ask them the questions directly. And you can kind of go back and forth in that context. At a Title IX hearing, it's a little bit more structured.
Okay.
You ask the questions, but they go through the hearing board. So the questions are directed to the hearing board itself.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
so it makes it a little bit more difficult to go back and forth with a witness or with a victim. But yeah, cross-examination occurs by the advisor. All other parts of a case is the student, right? So the accused will give their own opening statement. The accused will give their own closing statement. And again, this is something that's not natural for them. They've never done it before.
Right.
It's
a lot of pressure.
Correct. And how to persuasively articulate your side of the story. So we prepare cross-examination for ourselves because we ask the questions. But as far as like the opening and closing statements at a hearing, I prepare these kids. And I call them kids that, they're 18, 19, 20 years old.
you,
right?
they are kids, yeah.
Exactly. and I prepare them for what is expected, how to think about their particular case, how to articulate what their point is. And it becomes advantageous to have an attorney as your advisor because their attorney, whether it's me or anybody else, has lived through these situations. We've gone to trial. We've done our own opening statements and closing statements. So I think it's important to hire an attorney. And no disrespect to professors who have that position at the school. It's important that there are people available for students. But if it were my kid, I would hire an attorney.
Right. So how is this different from a criminal case?
So in a criminal case,
Because it doesn't apply. It's not a real trial. The rules are not the same.
The rules are different, right? So you think about a criminal trial. Number one, you have a judge, right? Or you have a jury. Each side has an attorney. And in a criminal case, I think the most important thing is you have a right to remain silent, right? It's a constitutional protection. You don't have to do or say anything. They have to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case. Burden of proof is way up here in a criminal case. Burden of proof in a Title IX hearing is much lower. It's preponderance of the evidence. And also, you have a right as a student to not be interviewed. You don't have to participate in this investigation whatsoever. But in my opinion, you don't share the same constitutional protection of the right to remain silent if you don't give a statement and if you don't talk to the investigators about what the allegation is. And if you go to a hearing and you don't talk to the hearing board about your side of the story,
doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And you don't have the same protections. So in a lot of ways, you have to defend yourself. And if you don't defend yourself, it's probably not going to look very good.
Does it make it difficult for you during a hearing because there aren't the same rules in place?
I think it goes both ways. I think it's harder because the evidentiary standards are different, right? Hearsay is admissible at these Title IX hearings. The hearing board, prior to even starting the hearing, will get a investigation report. The last case I did, it was several hundred pages long of the whole investigation. So when those hearing board members come into the hearing, they generally know what everyone has said in response to questions by the investigators. And in a criminal case, that's completely not true. You pick a jury, the jury comes in, they have absolutely no idea what this case is about. And quite frankly, even if they did have some knowledge about a case, whether it was covered in the media, they probably aren't going to get selected to the jury because they are familiar with the facts of the case for whatever reason. But if they do get selected to a jury, a judge is going to tell them they have to disregard everything they heard outside of the courtroom. The only evidence is what is said and presented in a courtroom, which is different in Title IX. The investigative report goes to the hearing board. They read it all, even for,
So
people,
they walk in kind of with a mindset of how they feel about it already.
Yeah,
potentially.
They might. That's a risk that there is. They come in, they know what the parties have already said. Obviously, they have to remain unbiased, and they have to let the hearing play out. But I think natural human context is you draw your first impressions about people, about events, about cases. And it's hard to set that aside once it takes place.
Well, because in a criminal case, you pick the jury on the first day, and no one knows anyone, right? Why? To keep it fair and impartial.
Of course.
So it's kind of interesting that these schools, it's almost like having a biased jury to a point, because they are either part of the school, they already know these people, they know about the case already, and it's with something being alleged against someone that could hold so much weight to affect both parties' futures. I just feel like that can't be right either.
Well,
to me, that doesn't seem right.
There is a process of objecting to a hearing board member. You get the hearing board member's name in advance. So we try to do our due diligence in looking into these people to see what department they work in, what they teach. Have they ever taught either the victim, a witness, or my client?
That's something you look into.
Correct.
So hiring
an
attorney or an advisor would do that.
Yeah, and we have objected successfully to certain hearing board members who we don't believe can be fair and impartial, either because of a pre-existing relationship or maybe just a viewpoint that they have. There was one particular case where a hearing board member we discovered wrote their PhD about a particular topic that was extremely relevant to our case. And it was completely inappropriate that person would sit on this particular case, not for any reason other than not every case is the right case for that person, right? So in a criminal context,
to be objective.
Exactly. If you're in a criminal case and you're sitting on a DWI jury and someone in your family was killed by a drunk driver, in all honesty, we can all look in the mirror and probably agree that that's probably not the right case for them.
Right.
But we would have never known that hearing board and our student would have never known what that person's theory was on their doctorate if we didn't look into it. But for the most part, I think colleges, they have a goal of being fair and unbiased. And we've had good luck, and that schools do it the right way. But there's always the chance, which is why you have to uncover every stone and turn over every rock. When you're getting close to a hearing, because these things are important.
Have we ever represented victim and the alleged? I know we have represented the alleged.
Yep, the accused student.
Yes,
That's
accused student.
Sure,
Sorry,
and that's
but
that's
also
primarily
the victim, right? We could represent both.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and it's interesting to think about.
Not in the same case, but
correct. So primarily, we get calls by students who are accused, right, to protect their rights. Victims, in cases, they're also entitled to advisors, right? And the school likewise provides advisors to the alleged victims. And in this context, like we went back to the beginning, this is an extremely important topic, right? Sexual assault, sexual harassment, dating, domestic violence, it should not happen. The goal of these laws is to eradicate all of these problems from our colleges' campuses so that kids can go to school and get an education.
Right.
And that's both sides. That's victims and that's the accused as well. So we can represent victims of Title IX violations. It doesn't happen as frequently for all the reasons that we talked about, but it's important, and they should have representation as well.
Right. So can you give me an example of a case that we've done?
Sure. We've done several, and we've been successful at them. And I think the success that we have stems from the amount of preparation and work that we put into it, between hiring our own investigator, but it also goes back to our prior experience, right? All of the attorneys who work for our office, I primarily handle these Title IX cases, and I was a prosecutor for several years. I prosecuted several cases, several big cases. I am now a defense attorney. I've defended several cases and several big cases. So I've seen both sides of the coin, if you will. And the approach that we take to our cases, which has led to our success, is we want to know more, right? We want to know more than the other side. We want to speak to the individuals. We want to go through all of the evidence and prepare these students so that they have their fair day in court, if you will. I know it's not court, but they deserve their fair day in court. And we've represented several students who, like I said before, we basically came to our own conclusion and opinion that the allegations were false. And in those cases, the hearing board agreed with us. But we just finished a case at a local school. It was extremely challenging, right? I won't get into the names, the details, but we represented a student who was accused of sexual assault. And it's a challenging process because you know that if your client is found responsible, they are likely going to be suspended or expelled. And some of these students that we represent are in their senior year, right? So if you think about how much time and effort that student has taken to get to that point in their life that they're about to walk across the stage and begin a career, and it can all be over in the blink of an eye.
Right. Under an allegation that we believe was not true.
Correct. So in the last particular case, and in all cases, we collect evidence that tells the true story, right? People can say whatever they want to say. People can say that things happened. People can say how they felt during a particular interaction. But like we talked about before, the text messages, they tell the truth. Right. The photographs, they tell the truth. The videos that we collect, they tell the truth. We've done some pretty crazy things in these cases. I say crazy, it's not really crazy at all. We collect bank records, right, to prove where a person was. What were they doing on a particular day?
Right.
We talked about the Easy Pass records before.
Right. Was this even possible to have happened?